Although many amateur astronomers chose to buy sophisticated mirrors and lenses, when it came to making their telescopes, they were more inventive, like Reg Spry.
This is the first telescope I made. The mirrors were made professionally. I don't play about making mirrors, it's too difficult. But here you've got a couple of shells out of the larder, a half shaft from a car, the viewfinder, that was made from the optics taken from an old pair of binoculars that had seen better days. That is a piece of loo plumbing. These are the tops of some coffee jars. It doesn't have to be enclosed. See, this flap covers the mirror, and then in here there's another little mirror that sends the view through here.
You need a lot of complicated tools to put this together, I suppose.
Oh no, just 4 tools I use for that, which I'll show you upstairs presently.
Oh, good,
Yes.
Even now, many British enthusiasts have followed in Reg's footsteps.
And this telescope I've made, it's a long time ago. To make this telescope and all the parts, probably about 3 weekends. It's made from aluminium sheeting rounded off. The stand is sewer pipe. This is a part of a police no waiting sign. These are weights to counteract this telescope, to balance it. And these are brake drums filled up with concrete. Since I've been here, the trees all around have got taller, there's extra sheds put up. So I really want to raise this telescope higher and higher. So I've made it onto this box, and I can actually raise this box by using these car jacks. I have 2 car jacks here, which I can turn and raise the telescope up. These can be turned very slowly. I can raise the telescope up a further 1 foot. This box can go up slowly to try and clear some of the trees.
The British amateur astronomer's horizon didn't stop at telescope making. The 1950s economic boom meant British people had more money and more leisure time. For the modern back garden astronomer, this meant they could also afford to build their own observatories, as Paul Doherty showed Patrick Moore.
Well, it is nothing more than a box, of course, but it serves its purpose in that it protects the telescope from the weather.
Well, it's pretty heavy, and it looks a bit dangerous as it swings back.
Yes, you need to know what you're doing with
I
it.
imagine you do. Well, it works beautifully, Paul, but one thing I do notice, and that is that the roof is still vertical, and surely that must cut off part of the sky.
It does, actually. I'm not too worried about it. The southern sky is the most important part for me, and eventually I will get some large counterweights fitted up on that to make the whole thing lighter, and eventually it will fold right back.
I see.
The custom of giving your telescope a good home continues to this day. Though for some, like Roger Steer from Bristol, camouflaging it in a garden shed is the preferred option.
Yes, I mean, it's technically an observatory. I built it because I found I was taking so long to set up my telescope when I wanted to go out and observe that I thought if I had a building where my telescope was housed, I could just open it up and I would be there observing straight away. Of course, this caused me a problem because my garden floods in the winter on occasion, so I had to build myself an island before I built it. So I built myself an island and then put the shed, as you call it, on top of it. The roof slides back, opens up and reveals the sky so I can observe.
Wiltshire-based fantasy writer Terry Pratchett has gone for something more upmarket. His state-of-the-art observatory, called the TARDIS, is the fulfilment of a lifelong dream. It also has a more practical purpose.
I think I decided to have an observatory built when I just got fed up with having my toes frozen off. The best viewing nights are inevitably cold nights in the winter. And when you have a telescope on a tripod, you have to get things set up, you have to run electrical leads across the lawn, and you have to mess about a bit. And then, just as you've got it right, it starts to rain or the cloud comes up, And I was just getting so fed up with being cold. You know, I could always tell what was going to happen because the gritting lorry would go past on the road. And frankly, freezing to death was beginning to spoil the fun. Well, the dome is ash. It was made for me by a superb boat builder who treated it as a kind of upturned boat. We had to solve all the problems as we went along. I think there's some skateboard wheels in here somewhere. Getting the motor, that took a bit of doing. There were all kinds of strange calculations that we had to do about wind speeds up here in case the top of the dome came off. It was really a case of making it up as we went along, but making it up out of very good materials, I have to say.
Comfortable observatories like Terry Pratchett's meant amateur astronomers could put in long nights of stargazing as they hunted for new discoveries. Indeed, many wanted to emulate George Alcock, the hero of the modern amateur tradition. He was a schoolteacher who made the news in 1983 when he spotted a comet from his Peterborough home.
Soon after the British scientists found the comet, the amateur astronomer Mr. George Alcock from Peterborough also saw it. Comets are called after the first 3 people to see them independently. Mr. Alcock was the 3rd, so it will be called the Iras-Akari-Alcock comet.
George saw the comet as he passed by his landing window with his binoculars.
Yes, this was the mat I was kneeling on. I came and put my wife, she was sleeping in that bed there. Well, not sleeping, I didn't put her to bed. I just walked across here, took hold of these, and in a matter of, well, it couldn't have been more than a couple of minutes, I was kneeling down here, and lo and behold, there it was.
So this was Iras-Akari-Alcock?
That's it, that's the one. That was the one that was found here. The big one. Well, it wasn't. It was a small comet, but it had to be big because it was near.
When Alcock made a discovery, he'd phone Guy Hurst of the British Astronomical Association, who'd verify it with his own telescope. Guy remembers these calls only too well.
It was very exciting because I get a lot of false alarms, as I've already said, and to actually know that somebody with that reputation is ringing me is pretty exciting, because you're going to go outside and perhaps be only the 2nd person in the world to see a new comet. In fact, I do remember one particular incident where he discovered a comet that was fairly bright in binoculars, was overhead, and the whole world had missed it. And we to this day, it's difficult to know why it got there without anybody noticing it earlier. But to actually be the sort of 2nd person in observing it is a very, very exciting moment, really.
George Alcock discovered a total of 5 comets and 5 novae in his lifetime. It was an astonishing achievement, possible only after years of memorising tens of thousands of stars.
Even now, his name is just revered. You know, he knew the night sky better than anybody else, probably anybody who's ever lived, to be honest. I think his trick was that the observing became a nightly ritual. You know, like most people say, they will, lesser mortals, dare I say, they will sit down at night and they will switch on Coronation Street, or they will switch on EastEnders. With him, it was like that. It was night time, he went out. But it was just a ritual. It was, you didn't think about what you were going to eat, you didn't think about what you were watching on television. You got home from school, it got dark, you went out with your binoculars. And so, and of course, he'd spent 6 years memorising the night sky. So there was no way anybody could compete with him. Nobody else was in that league.
Alcock's dogged commitment to astronomy earned him an MBE, and later, on his death, Peterborough Cathedral took the rare step of dedicating a plaque to him. His work set the benchmark for serious amateurs who were struggling to make discoveries in the face of professional, government-funded research centres, like the Radio Observatory at Jodrell Bank near Manchester. Expensive technology allowed space researchers to probe deeper and deeper into space, an area out of reach for the amateur. But Alcock's work proved that back garden observers still had a role to play.
Without the modern amateur astronomer, The professionals they'd be able to do their major work, but what they wouldn't be able to do is what you might call constantly survey the skies for comets, for double stars, for variable stars, for things of that sort. Quite simply because most professional outfits actually have funding for very specific high-profile projects. Let's say the gas clouds in nebulae and things of that sort, or work done by Hubble. They don't have funding for the routine monitoring of the heavens. And for this, frankly, they need people who don't need paying.
So I think the sort of amateurs really come into their own in a way because of that. But if professionals are having to wait several years to get telescope time in Tenerife or Chile or wherever, the great thing about the amateur, he could just walk outside the back door and observe without waiting the 2 years, because if it's something new in the sky, it may be too late to wait that time.
For example, look at one example. There are things called supernovae, exploding stars, in very distant galaxies, billions of light years away. We want to find these things early because it's very important to catch them in their early stages. And amateurs have a very fine record here. They discover these by the dozen. They look round, and professionals can't do that.
Tom Bowles is president of the British Astronomical Association and a leading figure in supernovae work.
My real passion is supernova, and I think it's the sheer scale of supernova that really attracts me. The explosions are huge, they're ginormous explosions. Their distances are great. We're looking at distances of 100 million light years away, and I can see them from my back garden, and that's terrific. This first image here is the master image of the galaxy. On this side, we can see the same galaxy retaken just recently, and you'll see that there's a new star appeared just at the fringe of the galaxy, and that is a new supernova.
The amateurs' contribution has proved so useful, it's marked a turning point in their history. With their profile raised, they've been able to develop a special relationship with professional astronomers.
We had an example in the Beagle programme where there was amateur information which was very valuable to us, although unfortunately we could do nothing about it. When we were heading towards Mars when we were hoping to arrive at what was called the end of the dust storm season. Well, amateurs have watched the dust on Mars for years. In fact, we were told on December the 22nd, the dust storm season is lasting longer this year than it had any time in the 400 years of records that we have since the telescope was invented. So they were watching a record. You know, most professionals don't watch things like that anymore. They're looking further afield.
Beagle 2 captured the public's imagination in the same way other events like Halley's Comet and the recent solar eclipse did. But not all space stories which excite readers and journalists are so benign. Amateur astronomer Peter Birtwistle helps track asteroids that might hit the Earth. He's one of hundreds of worldwide nighttime observers collecting data on the trajectory of near-Earth objects.
Effectively, if a near-Earth object comes by, we try and follow it so that we can predict where it's going to go in the future and try and predict whether it will potentially hit the Earth. And so far, so good. There was an occasion a year and a half ago where there was an asteroid and the initial prediction was that it could hit the Earth the next day. It was about, I think it was 30 hours time. And you go to work and, did you have a good night observing last night? Well, yes. But there's an asteroid that might hit us tomorrow. It's some very strange thoughts. You just resign yourself to trying to find out whether anybody's observed it and whether they can refine a prediction. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
You're very philosophical.
You can only be like that, really. You can't worry too much about it.
Peter, like most amateur astronomers, has two jobs. A software architect by day, he's out in his fiberglass observatory at night, whatever the weather.